Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington, D.C. It's the afternoon of Friday, August 9th, and we call you to take immediate action in defense of Egypt. And the issue here is a series of wire service dispatches from a number of places that there's going to be a new U.S. ambassador to Egypt, and that ambassador, according to the intentions of Skull and Bones Kerry, is none other than Robert Ford. You heard it right. Robert Ford, former U.S. ambassador to Syria. He is the person who superintended and supervised the U.S. introduction of death squads into Syria. He was, of course, then the provocateur who clashed with the Assad government, blatantly interfering in the domestic sovereign affairs of the nation of Syria. He did this starting in July 2011. Robert Ford made a pilgrimage to some group of democracy freaks and also undoubtedly covert death squad operatives. That was in July of 2011. And as recently as May of this year, Ford snuck into Syria to meet with death squad fanatics fighting the government. This is probably the preparation for the later trip into Syria by Walnuts McCain, the notorious warmonger. Now, Ford has not yet been officially proposed by the Obama White House, and therefore the immediate imperative, we'll have some more details about Ford in a second, but get ready now for action. Here is what you must do. It's not enough to know, you've also got to act. We must generate an international cause célèbre against Ford, because where Ford goes, there the death squads go also. Ford is notorious as a disciple of John Negroponte, and it was said originally of Negroponte, starting in Salvador in the 1980s, that where Negroponte goes, there the death squads also appear quite quickly. We can certainly say that Ford is by now he is the leading disciple of Negroponte. The only competition, I guess, is the late Chris Stevens, an expert in the same kind of thing. This is what passes for State Department Arabists. State Department Arabists used to be people who actually had some sympathy for the Arab nations and the Arab peoples. But now you can see we've got bloody-handed lunatics posing as the State Department Arabists. So Ford is vulnerable to a well-done international publicity campaign. Those of you in Europe, take advantage of the Ferragosto. Take advantage of the August 15th low point in domestic news in your countries, right? If you're in Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Bavaria, and a number of other places, lots of space in the newspaper that has to be filled. Call up a friendly journalist, get him to cover this story. Robert Ford is associated with the appearance of death squads in these countries. It goes back to Negroponte in Central America in the 1980s, and it is called the Salvadoran solution. The Salvadoran solution means you unleash death squads either to destabilize a country or to consolidate a very unpopular dictatorial regime. Ford learned the craft at the knee of Negroponte, and of course, this was done in the laboratory of Iraq. It was in the middle part of the previous decade, about 2005, as the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq began to run into big trouble. It was necessary to foment a civil war between the Sunnis and the Shiites, something that had not existed before. This is not indigenous autochthonous. This is imported by the U.S., by the State Department, by these characters. So Negroponte appeared in Baghdad as the viceroy in about 2005, and before long, you had these death squads popping up, right? In particular, Sunni death squads killing the Shiites of the Mahdi army and others. And the original plan extended into Syria. In other words, Syria was viewed as part of it from the word go, kind of like the current emirate of Iraq and the Levant, or as they can say it, the emirate of Iraq and Sham, right? Sham, Damascus area, Syria, I guess in Arabic. So that was part of it from the very beginning. In other words, the destabilization of Syria was considered to be part and parcel of the U.S. presence in Iraq, and it was designed also to try to divert various death squad volunteers. Instead of coming all the way into Iraq, they could simply go to work in Syria, preparing for what would be. And, of course, then, after serving under Negroponte in Baghdad in the middle part of the previous decade, then Robert Ford was named ambassador to Syria, and that, of course, was a grim day for Syria. When Robert Ford comes to town, the death squads cannot be far behind. So that is now what the U.S. has in store for Egypt. Robert Ford means the creation of an Islamic emirate of the northern Sinai, an Islamic emirate of all of Sinai, made to order to provide the pretext for NATO to seize control of the Suez Canal and close it to the ships of Russia, China, Iran, Syria, whoever they don't like, North Korea, any country, Venezuela, right? Anybody they don't like, they can find some reason to keep them out. And, of course, that's just the beginning of it. It would then lead to the breakdown of the modern Egyptian state as founded by President Nasser back in the 1950s and 60s. Therefore, it's time to act. And the easy way to do it, there's a made-to-order method, very simple, user-friendly. You can get on the scoreboard in terms of opposing Ford. We do not want, those of you who are Americans, that is not the face of the United States. I'm sorry. No matter how degraded things may get here, Robert Ford is not the face of the United States. This is the monstrous visage of the abyss, of the inferno. He's some monster, one of the ones that populates Dante's hell. We'll figure out which one as the weeks go by. But the idea is you can go on Twitter. The guy's name is Robert Ford, right? It's simple. And there's already a page, the hashtag No to Robert Ford. Hashtag NOTOROBERTFORD. No to Robert Ford. Hashtag at the beginning. You go there and you voice your firm opposition. The term for what we need is PNG, persona non grata, a person who is not acceptable to Egypt. No agrément, no approval, no acceptance of this guy. Make him persona non grata, deny him the agrément, and send him packing. Time to mobilize. Stop Robert Ford. We do not want Robert Ford as U.S. ambassador to Egypt. Get out there and make it happen. And we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington on the 9th of August, 2013. Keep up with everything at Tarpley.net. Tarpley.net is one-stop shopping. Anything I put on the radio generally is there, and you don't need to go chasing it on all different websites. Get it on Tarpley.net. It's generally available there in a somewhat streamlined form. Some of the station breaks, so to speak, have been edit it out so it's more efficient for you. Tarpley.net and Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter. Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter. I'm going to go to town on Robert Ford starting as soon as the show is over, and I hope you do the same thing. If you go to No to Robert Ford right now, I'm proud to say we find a tweet by the gallant Igor Rasputin. He's on there. Igor Rasputin on the World Historical Scoreboard. No to Robert Ford, a friend of the program. And you've got all kinds of other tweets up here. Let's see. Adiab says, Dear Obama, we Egyptians are a free people. We have a long civilization on surface, so we refuse your new ambassador. Huh? Liz Sly, this is the Washington Post, reports that U.S. Syria Ambassador Robert Ford will be sent to Cairo, prompt Egyptians to tweet no to Robert Ford, blaming him for the Syria war. Yes, certainly a big factor, the preparation of the death squad apparatus. Not democracy protesters, forget that. From the very beginning in Syria, from the word go, before the word go, there were armed killers. The Syrian government put that stuff on the air. You can see the killers standing behind brick walls and so forth, firing with pistols to promote the degeneration of this into violence. In other words, the third force might have been democracy protesters and the Syrian police, but then the killers come in, kill somebody on both sides, and then you've got the thing going. No to Robert Ford. Let's see. The American dream is becoming the world's worst nightmare. We're not third world countries. Americans also in a nightmare, signed by Obama. How about this one? Ideally, Egypt would arrest Robert Ford and deport him immediately to Syria, where he would face trial for inciting violence. That's the spirit, right? Have some kind of historical overview. Let's take a look here. The tweet barrage is a story in itself. Here I'm looking at the France 24, France 24 webpage. Egypt rages against likely U.S. ambassador on Twitter. U.S. media reports that Robert Ford, former top U.S. envoy to Syria, will be Washington's next ambassador to Egypt, has sparked a vitriolic Twitter campaign over a Canadian conspiracy website's claim that he once ran death squads in Iraq. Now, what they're talking about is Global Research of Canada. Yes, with all due regard to Global Research of Canada, the world leader in defending Syria against death squads is none other than Tarpley.net. So all more power to Global Research of Canada. You can go back to my interview from Damascus in November 2011, talking about death squad. That's the first mention that I know of this entire problematic. So Egyptians on Twitter. You can get this in Arabic and in English, by the way. Take a look. If you know Arabic, you can certainly find it. It's reported that Ford is the choice of Skull and Bones Kerry. Let's just get that part. Ann Patterson, who disgraced herself with her prolonged public flirtation with Mohammed Morsi, so much so, as we reported in previous weeks, that the signs and pictures in the Cairo souks and streets showed Obama and Patterson supporting terrorism in the form of Morsi and his confrere of the Muslim Brotherhood. Ann Patterson now very, very damaged goods on the Egyptian market. Ann Patterson is being promoted. Ann Patterson, in the course of being promoted to Assistant Secretary of State for Middle East Affairs. Now, there's another one we don't want. Here in the U.S., we've got to protest against this Ann Patterson operation. And this would be, of course, the fact that both of these posts require Senate confirmation. So therefore, we're appealing to the Republicans of all stripes. I'm not going to go through the usual labels, right, because we want to be nice to them on this occasion. But it's time for Republicans to say no to these extremely reckless, irresponsible, and indeed aggressive and completely outrageous appointments of Patterson to be Assistant Secretary of State for Middle East Affairs, and then for the infamous Ford to go to Cairo. Cairo doesn't want him, and we don't want him here in the U.S. either. No to Robert Ford in English and Arabic. We refuse the American ambassador to Egypt, says Twitter. The new sponsor of terrorism in Egypt is Ford. They don't like him. Let's see what else. It's taken up. The issue is taken up in Al Masri Al Yum newspaper there in Cairo. There's a big backlash. The backlash could not come at a worse time for Washington, says France 24. Let's see what else we find. When Robert Ford enters a country, he brings the shayatin, the devils, in, tweeted one user in Arabic. Another calls Robert Ford the architect of fitna, or upheaval. There are rumors that instead of going to a normal gymnasium, Robert Ford exercises in a fitna salon. How about that? So that's Ford. Kerry recommended Ford for the post. He would have to be picked by Obama and then approved by the Senate. No. And there's no amount of $1.5 billion in U.S. aid that's going to change this. So we wish to assume leadership here of the campaign to block the incendiary torpedo, Ford, because where Ford goes, the death squads follow in his wake. So this has to end. And Patterson, too. No to Patterson. No to Ford. So remember, no to Robert Ford. We'll repeat that several times during the course of it. Now, just in Egypt, since we're there, we've got now the end of the Ramadan month. We're having the Eid al-Fitr holiday in Egypt. I think that extends until Sunday. After that, sometime in the next week, in the Western calendar, right, sometime next week, it's likely that there will be some kind of a mop-up of those demonstrations that are simply trying to block traffic in Cairo, keep the city paralyze economic life. We'll wait and see for that. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington, August 9th, 2013. So the rap against Ford is that he participated as the right-hand man of Negroponte in Baghdad in the creation of the original death squads in that part of the world. This was also something that included Syria, an integral part of it from the very beginning, and that then in 2011, in the earlier part of the year, the same year that the destabilization started, Ford moved on over to Damascus. Now he hasn't been able to operate in Damascus. He's been essentially PNG'd in practice in Damascus. But PNG is the word for this guy, persona non grata. Put that on Twitter, and remember, where he comes, wherever he travels, that's where the death squad seem to spring up in his wake. So that is unacceptable, and that, of course, is extremely ominous. Right? What it stresses. Let me just try to do justice to this. Last Saturday, so after our broadcast here last week, this was actually on Sunday. The Washington Post main headline: harsh words for U.S. from Egypt. It's an interview with General Sisi. Sisi looking more and more like the new Nasser, looking precisely like the right man in the right place with the right time with the right program. Harsh words from Sisi for the U.S. You turned your back on the Egyptians, and they won't forget that. And it means you turned your back on Egypt by not bridling the lunatic excesses of Morsi when you could have done it. Indeed, the U.S. encouraged them to cave in to the International Monetary Fund and encouraged Morsi to cave in, to begin contemplating lunatic military adventures against Ethiopia and, above all, against Syria, right? The jihad against Syria declared by Morsi in the mass meeting in downtown Cairo on the 15th of June, a week or so after the fall of Qusair and the defeat of the death squad. So you get the idea that Egypt becomes a pawn of Western geopolitics. And let me just go through a couple of the key quotes here again. Morsi says to Lally Weymouth, the family that's now saying goodbye to the Washington Post, house organ of the Federal Reserve System. Lally Weymouth interviews Sisi. Sisi says, the dilemma between President Morsi and the people, the split between Morsi and the Egyptian people, originated from the Muslim Brotherhood's concept of the state, the ideology that they adopted for the building of a country, which is based on restoring the Islamic religious empire. That Islamic religious empire is the caliphate, and I would bet, that in the original Arabic, he says caliphate. But the Washington Post, of course, wants to clean up the act for these Muslim Brotherhood characters, so they try to sanitize it. But the Islamic religious empire is the thing that Morsi was trying to bring, and this is what Sisi doesn't want. Sisi is a nationalist, okay? His identity is primarily as an Egyptian and not in any religion, sect, or subdivision thereof. He is a Nasserist, in other words. He's been shown on pictures, placards in the streets of Cairo, carried by tens of thousands of people. Nasser, Sisi, fine. That's just what we need. Even the desire to do this is already a big plus. Sisi's critique of the Muslim Brotherhood goes on. This is an international organization, cosmopolitan, we could say. They have branches in more than 60 countries, the Muslim Brotherhood. The idea that gathers them together is not nationalism. It's not patriotism. It's not a sense of a country. It is only an ideology that is totally related to the concept of the organization, which is maximum organizational gate receipts, maximum seizure of power, and then the caliphate as the crowning achievement, meaning that the nation-state is illegitimate. Well, no. The nation-state, founded 700 years ago in the pilot project by Dante in Milan with the Visconti family, 1310 and following, that is the building block of the modern world, right? And the ideas of it brought to Egypt by Napoleon in the early 1800s. So, the critique also of U.S. foreign policy, says Sisi, you left the Egyptians. You turned your back on the Egyptians, and they won't forget that. And now you want to continue turning your back on the Egyptians. Millions of Egyptians were calling for change in Tahrir. What is your response to that? The U.S. interest and the popular will of Egypt do not have to conflict. He claims that there were 30 million people in the streets against Morsi and for the army. This is when Sisi issued the call on the 26th of July, right? Remember Cubans remember that. Well, we got a new 26th of July, new meaning heaped onto the 26th of July, and that is the day that 30 million Egyptian patriots, nationalists went into the streets and said, no to obscurantism, no to war with Syria, no to war with Ethiopia, and no to the IMF, all of this. So, he basically says, you guys, you, the U.S., you have the inside track with the Muslim Brotherhood. The U.S. administration has a lot of leverage and influence with the Muslim Brotherhood. I'd really like the U.S. administration to use this leverage with them to resolve this conflict, meaning tell them to clean up their demonstrations and go home. The goal of those demonstrations is to block economic activity and just try to shut things down. He's resentful that the U.S. wouldn't deliver those F-16s, right? That is not the way to deal with a patriotic military establishment. Hagel calls him every day. Kerry, not Obama. Obama didn't call him. So, all in all, this is a tremendous step forward. This is Nasserism in action, anti-imperialism, and now we need the part of economic development, right? You seize control of the Suez Canal, you use the tolls to build the Aswan High Dam. You assert national independence, in that case, against Britain, France, Israel. And you attract others, right? Russia, you can even attract the U.S. if you do it right, or you could in those days. And finally, Sisi says, if the army had not intervened, there would have been a civil war in Egypt within several months. And he says, I told Morsi 4 months before the counter-coup that he was steering towards a civil war. And it means, of course, the fact that Morsi was massively rehabilitating terrorist organizations, right? We stressed that the governor of Luxor province in Upper Egypt, right, the Valley of the Kings on the Upper Nile, right, way south of Cairo, that the governor of that province had become the leader of a terrorist group that had killed 60 or 70 foreign tourists there about 15 years ago. Great. Come on down and get beheaded by Al-Qaeda, right? Great tourist advertising. Now, you can't build an economy on tourism, but on the other hand, the education of the world and also some good money, which is not to be scorned, can come in the process. But above all, they need to have a modern economy, and we'll be looking at development plans for Egypt as the time goes on. So that is what the U.S. is most concerned about, right? The imperialists in general are appalled by this positive development, right? This positive evolution. And therefore we have the two amigos, right? We have John Walnuts McCain and Lindsey Graham from the cradle of secession, South Carolina. He even refers to this. He says, Civil War is bad. We started one, and we didn't like it. Yeah, they got burned out by Sherman. The two amigos, McCain and Graham, were there, and McCain shooting his mouth off. It was a coup, it was a coup, it was a coup. Sorry, Senator, it was a counter-coup. There was already a coup in motion by Morsi, including a war. This was a counter-coup to stop it. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now, we've just about finished with Egypt. We're going to go back to Egypt, and of course, we've got a lot to talk about concerning Syria and U.S.-Russian relations. But let's turn for a moment to domestic U.S. matters, and our favorite topic in the U.S., the most meaningful election going on this year so far, the New York City mayoral election, and that includes the Democratic primary for mayor, which is the 10th of September, and then after that, there is a general election in the first week of November, I believe on November 5th. So we want to get another organizing report. We're delighted to be joined by Daniela Walls.
Hi, Webster.
Hello. Famous in her own right as a stand-up comedian. I must say that the response to Daniela's appearance here 2 weeks ago is the warmest and most positive and constructive response I think we've had to any guest on the show. So I want Daniela.
I can't believe that. That's so nice because I thought it was long-winded having to get through all this information about the petition process and everything we needed, but we got tons of volunteers and a lot of donations, so thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All right. So look, you do this any way you want. I think most people are interested above all in the signatures, right? We know that we need 3,700 approved, right, validated signatures to get on the ballot in November, that is to say the Tax Wall Street Party. So tell us where we stand.
We have really good news on that front because we're really close to our minimum 3750 threshold. We did a count last night, and we're a little bit above 3,000. But can I tell you some fun things first that happened this week before I forget? Okay, so somebody, Webster, approached one of our petition team leaders on the street in New York City and asked if he was from the Tax Wall Street Party movement. So isn't that cool?
So the drumbeat is on the sidewalks of New York.
Yes. Yes, it is. And that brought everybody's spirits up. And then we had, from your audience, a bunch of emails to our Tax Wall Street Party at Gmail and the Tax Wall Street Party.org website from South Africa and Scotland and London and Italy and Germany and also everywhere in America. And in London, they said they want to start their own version of the Tax Wall Street Party, and they told me they wish they had it there. The City of London pays a small transaction tax. I was researching a bit about this, and it's in the form of a stamp duty, but I can't really explain a stamp duty.
It's too small. It's just it's a stamp tax. In other words, any document, any transaction has to pay this tax, and you prove that you paid it with the stamp tax. But it's too small.
Yeah, our new European friends said they wanted to call for our higher 1% sales tax.
Right, and of course that goes into the public treasury to help poor people get on Social Security and Medicare and the social safety net. Not for the pelicans, the pandas, and the polar bears in the first analysis.
Right. I think that's what they're calling for it with the Robin Hood tax. I don't know where that money's going to, but we're trying to have it go for to protect our social safety net, and Social Security, and infrastructure, and jobs programs, and all these cool new visionary projects like free tuition, maybe. And we're working that out. All the things we want to put it toward, but it's going to be very meaningful what we come up with. But our European friends were also excited about the other main program point of turning the private Federal Reserve back into a national bank. And then we talked about, how that would work out for them. And so in London or Scotland, they would call for the nationalization, I guess, of the Bank of England. And then the guy in South Africa wanted to nationalize the South African Reserve Bank, and in Germany, the Bundesbank, et cetera. So it's very cool. And then good. Yeah, that was very, very nice to know. And then I have this other interesting story to tell you that sorry, my dog's barking. This week, Randy was on the cover of New York City's biggest commuter magazine called New York Metro. And it's one of these like free magazines that every commuter reads. They have them in subway stations and at Grand Central in the train station. Well, okay, Randy was on the cover with a big picture of him and a quote about taxing Wall Street. And this magazine is is owned by a Swedish company. They're not American. And they were really interested in the Wall Street sales tax when they interviewed Randy. The way they had Randy on the cover, it looked like he was the leader of the pack in this Democratic primary. So right there on the cover, it's Randy Credico for mayor, tax Wall Street. Anyway, somebody in New York City must have given the stand-down order on circulating this week's issue because most of the kiosks were empty, and they weren't handing out these magazines to the commuters who passed by like they normally do, and there were bales of these New York Metros just dumped in out-of-the-way places in the train station. So we were a little concerned about that. What do you think?
We don't know, but we've got to press ahead, right? We can't sit around puzzling over stuff like that, right? The main thing is, 2, 3, many such articles. Right, and maybe they didn't want information about the tax Wall Street, but better to have Anthony is reader. So I understand that some right-minded activists have secured a number of copies anyway that can be handed out.
Yeah, we took them all, and we're passing them out when we do petition, so people can have information. So we hauled back like 20, 50 pounds of these things in our backpacks.
Now, look, if I want to go and sign for you, if I'm a New York City registered voter, I wake up on Sunday or Monday morning, I say, well, today's the day to go and sign for the Tax Wall Street Party, and I'm very interested in the Randy Credico for mayor. What do they do? Can they go, for example, to the website and find out where the squad is?
Yeah, you can go to the website, and then you can hit on the calendar link, and you're going to find out exactly where the team is. But this changes moment by moment because we're trying to find the best locations. Like sometimes we'll get to an event like a farmer's market or a fair, and we find out that it's pretty empty. So we have to change at the last minute. So the best thing to do is call the petition team leader, Chris Reith, and his number is 908. Hold on one second. I put his number somewhere on a piece of paper, and I'll tell you, but in a minute when I get to it. Sure. I can't find it right this second. But call Chris Reith, or you can email me at taxwallstreetparty at Gmail. So last week we had 1,000 signatures. This week we got close to our minimum at around 3,000. So that's fantastic. And
but of course, the minimum is the minimum, and we want to have an insurance policy. We want to have an ample cushion in case they send some unscrupulous lawyer in there and saying, "Oh, I'm going to disallow this one because there's no dot over the I, and this one doesn't have a T crossed, so that's invalid." Blah blah blah, and they have hanging chad. I don't know what they have, but they're going to try to disallow them. So you got to have at least twice as many, right?
Well, ideally, we'd like to turn in at least 7,500 to avoid these challenges. Because when they see a big number come in, they don't even bother. The problem is if we have a small number, they will. But we're going to have 10. We're going to have 10 days, and this is going to be our big final push. We have till midnight on August 20th to submit our valid signature total. That gives us 10 days. Yeah, and there may be challenges, but like you said, we want to get our number as high above 3,750 as possible because I don't know if Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein will be there in New York to greet us with their open arms when the Tax Wall Street petitions land on the election board desk. But so we'd like to have our number as high as possible. So it's critical now that people call to volunteer. You can call me at 310-926-1584. And also donating, please. Like if you donate, this will supplement our volunteers with paid professional petitioners. You can donate at credico2013.org/donate. You'll also see the donate button on Randy's website, credico2013.org, CREDICO2013.org. And this our professional street team of petitioners is great. We really got a good crew, and they're paid by the hour. Like I said in the last episode, their time is working out to about $1 per signature. So if you can give 25, then and you're not in New York, you've gathered 25 signatures for us. If you give more like 100.
Hang on, Daniela. We've got a hard break. I just want to wrap up in the beginning of the next segment.
Okay.
Right after the news. Okay? We'll be right back on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. on the afternoon of August 9th. We're just finishing up with Daniela Walls, who is prominent figure, organizer of the Tax Wall Street Party in New York City, now coming together, and it's planting a flag, as you hear, that's having resonance across the world, and certainly on the sidewalks of New York, and also the Randy Credico campaign, right? The mayoral candidate in the context of the Democratic primary on the 10th of September and the general election on November 5th that finally decides who gets to be mayor, right, in the wake of the Bloomberg disaster. Now, Daniela, we've got this campaign going on, right? People see Wiener on television, right? They got Wiener and Huma Abedin, and it's important to realize that in quite a few of these cases, Randy Credico is there going toe-to-toe with Wiener, right? Wiener is there with his nonsense. We know that Wiener has been begging Credico, please stop mentioning that I voted for the Iraq War. And, of course, not only did he vote for the Iraq War, he voted for the bailout of the Wall Street banks twice. He voted for the Patriot Act, and he voted for the Iraq War. This is a pretty ugly record.
Well, he had an ugly record, but then this week, didn't he continue to unravel when he called George McDonald at the AARP forum, one of the three Republican candidates for mayor?
Right.
He called him Grandpa. Like, it's totally out of control. Like, he's an out-of-control candidate. He's putting down a rival, calling him Grandpa at the largest senior citizen convention.
Right. He calls him Grandpa at the convention of grandpas. And I have here the Washington Post, the Washington Post style section from August 7th, Wednesday. And here we have Christine Quinn struggling for liftoff. Having Mike Bloomberg in her corner isn't boosting Christine Quinn's bid to become mayor.
Bloomberg.
Well, right. So she's the tool of Bloomberg. She's the one who made it possible for Bloomberg to have another 4 years of virtual dictatorship of finance capital over the city.
Right.
So,
right, yeah.
Any events coming up? I mean, can we look forward to Credico going toe-to-toe with these degenerates anytime this week?
When we were on the break, I just want to say real quick, I found Chris Reed's phone number. The
Go ahead.
team leader, 908-433-3266. 908-433-3266. Chris will give you real-time, moment-by-moment information on where the petition team is.
Right. If you want to line up a bunch of people, come and visit Chris. It's off in Union Square. It's often in the village, Greenwich Village down there, and other places.
Yeah.
Are there any other candidates' debates that we can look forward to?
I don't have any information on any candidates' debates. Last week, Randy did lots of radio, and I think he did lots of national radio, spreading the word about the Wall Street sales tax. I think yesterday he was on NPR. Oh, he was on NPR yesterday. There's going to be some debates coming up this week, but you're going to have to check the calendar because I update that on Sunday. Sunday's the day that Randy and I sit down and figure out where he's going to be. So I don't have a next big event, but Randy's also out on the street a lot of these days when he can steal some time with the petition team, meeting the volunteers and helping out himself. So most likely if you come to a couple petition days, you're going to hang out with Randy too.
So meet the candidate when you come and join the squad to sign up. Daniela, we're going to let you go in a second now, but please give us the contact information again, how to contact you, your phone number, your address, and the campaign website, and how to make a contribution.
TaxWallStreetParty@gmail.com. Please email me. I can tell you I can tell you all the information that I couldn't hear. My phone number, call me, 310-926-1584. If you are in New York City and you want to get out and petition at any time, call Chris Reese at 908-433-3266. And also, I just want to give a shout-out to Dan Burdorf. He's coming from as far away as Lincoln, Nebraska. He's flying in to help petition. And we like to say that this guy, Dan, is going to arrive with a cape on. I think he's a real hero here. And Dan Burdorf from Lincoln, Nebraska, to help us petition on the streets of New York City. It's very cool. That's what I've got for now. So
this is a worldwide movement. And again, the people who want to create tax Wall Street parties or tax the City of London parties in their respective countries, they have got the idea. That is exactly what this aims at. It's not parochial. It's not regional. It's not some local event. This is designed to take programmatic leadership or to provide programmatic leadership. Occupy Wall Street, well, that's fine as far as it goes. But tax Wall Street is permanent and it's effective and it's going to change the power relations and open up a new world. Whereas we've got a
strong program and a strong list of demands.
There we go.
I think
and again, things like free college at the City University of New York, stopping foreclosures, health care for people in the city, a jobs program on the Works Progress Administration, FDR model, all of those things in the Credico program. Take a look at the Credico website.
Yeah. So, exactly, free transportation and Medicare for every resident.
Right. As we used to say, subway riding should be free. Who should pay? The bourgeoisie. And that would be the
that an old slogan? That's great. Well, subways,
and that would be Blank, Fine, and Diamond.
Subways, ferries, and buses should be free, and who should
subway riding must be free. Who should pay?
The Wall Street disease? The Wall Street disease. I don't know. Okay, thank you, Webster.
We'll see you next week. We want to have a report now. We're going into the hot phase of the campaign.
Okay, that's very kind of you, and thank you for your help on this.
See you next week.
Bye-bye, Web.
Bye-bye. All right, now, that's obviously the domestic story, right? You want to fight austerity, that's the way to do it. Obviously, you can also go and intervene at the district town meetings. It's August. The Congress has been out of town now for more than a week, or actually a week as of today or Friday. There are going to be these town meetings. Go to if you can't do anything vis-a-vis the New York situation. What you can do, what anybody can do, right? If you got bus fare, go to the town meeting of your congressperson, and intervene in favor of the Wall Street sales tax. If it's a Democrat, you tell them we don't want the chained consumer price index, no cuts in the social safety net. Wall Street has to pay. They pay nothing. Let them start paying before we talk about any kind of shared sacrifice. My God. And if it's a Republican, of course, same story, right? Why don't you tax Wall Street instead of trying to destroy the federal government, right? Remember, October 1st, the lunatics around Senator Mike Lee, little Rand Paul, Rubio, and the hypocrite Ted Cruz, married to Goldman Sachs. They're going to try to shut down the government and then bankrupt the government with a default. And of course, Obama, time to man up, Obama. It's called the 14th Amendment. The public debt of the United States legally incurred shall not be questioned. Debt ceiling is unconstitutional. Going bankrupt is illegal. Not paying the debt is illegal. Pay the debt and pay it to get the money. Enact the Wall Street sales tax, 1%, and the feds keep half. All right, now let's just change gears back again here. We've done the Robert Ford story, right? Everybody by now in this broadcast has already gone to No to Robert Ford on Twitter and let loose with a good, strong dose of criticism and demand that this rumor now be rescinded, right? That Ford not be officially named. If he is named, then block him, right? Hit him with a hold. Hit him with a filibuster. Stop him in any legal way. And we'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So now let's look at Syria specifically. Yesterday we had these hysterical, exaggerated reports from the death squads in Damascus. They claimed that they had been able to take some pot shots at the motorcade of Bashar Assad, the president of Syria. Shell fire, rocket fire. He was, of course, on his way to a mosque in Damascus for the solemnities at the end of the Ramadan. And I noticed he's accompanied in many of his public appearances by the Grand Mufti of Damascus, the guy standing next to him in the white head turban, I guess you'd say, is Dr. Husseini, a very fine person who is the Grand Mufti of Damascus. This is a model of Iranic tolerant Islam. You can take a look at his website, right? Grand Mufti of Damascus. His son was killed by terrorists, and he has publicly renounced any revenge or vendetta for that. So there's a model, I think, of some interest. So this is at the Anas bin Malik Mosque in the Malki neighborhood of Damascus. I've seen it. Upscale homes and everything, and public buildings. So the rebels claim that they took some pot shots, but, of course, according to the Washington Post here of this morning, Friday, August 9th, the problem they have is that there was then a television broadcast of Assad attending the prayers in the mosque unharmed. Unharmed, thank goodness, because he's a key guy right now. So the Tahrir al-Sham brigade claims they tried to kill him, and the Liwa al-Islam. Even in these operations, they can't agree on a single line. All right, so that is that story. I think in terms of events on the ground, the massacre of Kurds by the Al-Qaeda forces, by the Nusra and by the Islamic Emirate of Iraq and the Levant, Iraq and Sham, they've apparently killed about 450 Kurds. That's a massacre of everybody, right? Men, women, children, all ages. Complete silence in the hypocritical Western media. The Russia Today, RT, commend them for paying attention to this. They have interviews with various Kurdish people saying the following, that as a result of the unleashing of the death squads in Syria, the Kurdish part of the country in the northeast has attained a significant degree of autonomy, and this seems to be, for the moment, enough for them. But the Salafist terrorist groups, including the ones we've just mentioned, it is believed by the Kurds that those terrorist groups have been sent in under the auspices of the Turkish government. My God, Erdogan and Davutoglu apparently sending them in as trying to weaken and beat down the autonomy program of the Kurds. And in the middle of that, a reign of terror is described on RT today, Friday, and 450 dead reported in previous days. I put out a Twitter about this. So that has to be taken very seriously. The Kurds are essentially close to saying that it's certainly ethnic cleansing and possible genocide being carried out by the death squads that the U.S. is proposing to arm and indeed has been arming the whole time. Remember, I think this is an important element of analysis. A decision to send weapons to the Syrian rebels is not a new thing in terms of the hardware moving, but it provides legal cover for the CIA and State Department officials who have been doing that the whole time. And that would have included Ambassador Chris Stevens. He would have benefited, had he lived, from this legalization, right, post hoc, a posteriori, of the weapons shipments. The word now being, the term being bandied about concerning Syria is soft partition. Soft partition, it's an approximate, blurred partition. I think it looks something like France during the wars of religion in the 1560s, 1570s, 1580s, right? It's not fixed lines. It's not quite like the American Civil War. There are fairly clearly defined lines. This is coming from Al Arabiya, the Al Arabiya correspondent on National Pentagon Radio in the Diane Rehm Show weekly review, which you can hear. You want to get that analysis, go to that website, and you'll get the whole load of it. Soft partition, similar to Afghanistan in the consequences, worse than Afghanistan, in the sense that if you say Al-Qaeda must not be allowed to have sanctuaries, so here they've taken over the northern part of Syria. It is the rural part. It is the unpopulated part. And remember, those movements like what we've just had, right, the attempt to shoot at Assad, various stunts that they've pulled, the air base north of Aleppo that the rebels have taken over with some destroyed helicopters, and the operation that they pulled in Latakia. This is Jubal early. It's Jubal early in August of 1864, let's say, when the die is cast, Lee is being held in the death grip by Grant in the Petersburg trenches, but he shakes loose Jubal early to try some desperate bid to change the outcome, right? Comes close to breaking into Washington, D.C., right? Damascus, and burns Chambersburg. So atrocities. Try to attack the capital of the country and then go wild with atrocities. And that's what we're hearing from the Kurdish area, that Al-Qaeda is in a reign of terror, that they're simply just going around and killing people left and right. Now, in the middle of this, the world would need a summit between Obama and Putin, and I would hope at such a summit, Putin could lay out the case. Look, Obama, you've got people who are engaged in mass murder, they're doing atrocities, they're doing chemical weapons, they're fighting among themselves, they are, it's just a catalog of horrors that never ends. Obama, time to drop these death squads, right? Turn away. And it's dangerous, because if you have the Israelis, as we've seen, attacking shipments of Russian missiles, that could get very hairy very quickly. If the Israelis feel free to bomb Russian Yakontsk missiles and other missiles on Syrian territory, suppose they kill some Russian technicians or other Russian personnel. What happens then? I don't want to find out, but there is a limit to the willingness of Russia to accept this arrogant and unlawful behavior, in particular by the Israelis. So it's better to cool this off. That is what Putin might have said to Obama, but of course now that summit has been called off. More in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio here. It's August 9th. And remember, Tarpley.net, keep up with everything, and Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed. So, ongoing right now, as far as I can see, is this ministerial meeting. It is Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of Russia, Defense Minister Shigoi of Russia meeting their counterparts. John Forbes Kerry of Skull and Bones, the Secretary of State, and Chuck Hagel of Sequoia Voting Machines, the boss of the Pentagon. And this is an attempt to find a modus vivendi, some arrangement for dealing with bilateral relations in the wake of this, I think, infantile gesture by Obama. Why call that off? I think we can look, unfortunately, at Susan Rice. Who's running the White House National Security Operation? Susan Rice. Last Saturday, the worldwide alert of U.S. embassies and the closure of some of them and the travel ban was deliberated at the meeting of the National Security Council held in the White House by Susan Rice, so the old executive office building. And this was attended by Hagel and Kerry. Susan Rice, this venomous viper, is now running that part of the show. And I'm sure Susan Rice's advice was, Obama, don't go and meet Putin, because I think they have to realize that the power of Putin's arguments it is overwhelming. At the same time, that doesn't mean that Susan Rice is running every detail, and it may be that something may emerge, but it's not a good bet, especially because of Kerry, right? The main problem here is Kerry, who is devoted to intervention, and we've just heard Kerry is determined to send Robert Death Squads Ford as U.S. ambassador to Egypt. Egypt must refuse him, right? And as we said in the earlier segments, go to No to Robert Ford and register your lively dissent from this proposal. And anybody in the world can do it, right? Because it's a question of world peace, right? The world cannot tolerate the descent of Egypt into anarchy on the Libyan or indeed the northern Syrian model. So Lavrov, Shigoi, Kerry, Hagel, what do we hear? Lavrov, a very intelligent person, I think one of the most prestigious foreign ministers in the world right now. Lavrov says it is time for these two nations to act like grown-ups, and the U.S. and Russia have an obligation to the world to work together for peaceful solutions, right? And Lavrov, of course, is proposing a Geneva conference. This spokeswoman, this whatever her name is, the redhead, the new redhead at the State Department briefing, Scott or whatever her name is, she says, "Oh well, we've asked the death squads, and they're adamant that they won't go. They're not going to go and talk with somebody who has spilled blood like Assad. Well, how about you? This is the pot calling the kettle a genocidalist." Remember that the death squads have killed, I would say, more at this point, right? If you kill 450 Kurds, things like that add up. So it is ridiculous, right? The hypocritical one-sided analysis is totally wrong and out the window. So Lavrov is trying to have the Geneva conference. Obviously, Kerry doesn't want to have the Geneva conference because that would embarrass his death squad clients. So Lavrov and Shigoi, I think, probably deserve the confidence of civilized humanity. Kerry and Hagel, I'm sorry, not. Kerry, he wants you to know he's a preppy, right? He went to Andover, to Exeter, I forgot. He says, I'm an old hockey player. Lavrov and I are both old hockey players. We know that in hockey there's a certain amount of collisions, right? Checking, I guess. Well, our recipe for Kerry is Kerry lets you check out. Lets you check out of the State Department. Lets you be fired by Obama if he had any backbone. Surgeons are still looking. and Kerry should be impeached. How about you Republicans, right? Republicans in the House of Representatives, you wake up on the wrong side of bed. Don't live with that all day. Impeach Kerry. Plenty of reasons already, like trying to start a war without a declaration of war on June 12th when he tried to send bombers against Syria, getting the war going. Stopped, fortunately, by General Dempsey on that occasion. And in the background, right, hovering over Kerry and Hagel, obviously Susan Rice, right, or her slithering around in the corridors. Condoleezza Rice endorses Obama's decision. She says, "Oh no, we don't want to talk to those Russians." Now remember, Condi Rice was supposedly a Russian expert back in the Reagan administration. She started with this already. So, what can we say about the failed the summit that won't be, right? It should have led to the liquidation of the death squads. There were, of course, other issues. There is the anti-ballistic missile issue, which Russia rightly considers to be a threat to deterrence and therefore a temptation to the U.S. to engage in a first strike. Absolutely correct. There is also, Syria primarily. There's also an attempt to somehow portray Russia as hostile to gays, that somehow this is going to be an issue at the Olympics. I think this is not the intent of that law. I doubt very much that there'll be any issue of any kind of this type at the Sochi Winter Olympics, unless, of course, the equivalent of Pussy Riot and similar groups deployed by NATO intelligence go in there and try to create incidents, right? Maybe they'll send in a commando squad of Madonna and Lady Gaga, right, to try to provoke trouble, right? It seems to be the hour of the provocateurs. And the provocateur of the hour, of course, Snowden. Snowden is now a successful agent provocateur. And this is where real people's lives are at stake, right? If we'd had an Obama-Putin summit, and if Obama hadn't been weakened by these so-called revelations, which everybody knew, losing, 18% of his support among the youth, Obama might have been strong enough to say, all right, fine, I'm going to cut my losses, to hell with these Syrian death squads, right? I'm not going to go any further for them, right, because they haven't done anything for me. That would be typical Obama. But no. So Snowden now goes into the Guinness Book of Records as a successful agent provocateur. He has stopped. He's up there with the U-2, right? The U-2 was an example. The shooting down of the U-2 and Khrushchev's response and Eisenhower's response led to the canceling of the Paris summit. Snowden has accomplished that. 55 or so, 53, 54 years later. So, congratulations, Snowden. You are a successful agent provocateur. Concerning the anti-ballistic missile system, the Russian spokesman says the problem with the anti-ballistic missile system is that Russia wants to be considered a full partner. The U.S. refuses, NATO refuses to consider Russia as a full partner. And what they mean by that is they want to participate in it. In other words, the cover story on this system is it's directed against missile threats coming from the Middle East. Fine. Russia would like to be a part of that. No, you're not allowed to be a part of it. We want assurances that it's not directed against us, says Russia. Oh, NATO says, we'll give you our word of honor, but nothing in writing. Okay. So, congratulations, Snowden. We'll have a couple of words more about these whistleblowers here in the final segment. Welcome back to our final segment of this week's World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley in Washington. It's the 9th of August. Just a word about Bradley Manning. The obvious victim of much of this situation is Bradley Manning. I think someone who got into a situation of intrigue and betrayal beyond what he could imagine. I view him as a victim of this entire machination, and to a significant degree, a victim of Assange and of the rest of WikiLeaks. The problem that is posed by Manning is if the hallmark of WikiLeaks was supposed to be that you could leak documents through them and maintain your anonymity, how did Manning get exposed to the U.S. authorities, landing him in this terrible predicament of torture, solitary confinement, and all the rest? We're researching this, and I urge, if you have leads or inside knowledge of this document, send them on. Tarpley.net, Speakers Bureau contact feature. Bradley Manning started by leaking material about Iceland. And the first time I ever heard of WikiLeaks was in the late summer of 2009 from correspondents in Iceland as I was preparing to go to Iceland to campaign for the debt moratorium in October of 2009. I heard about something called WikiLeaks, and they had, at this point, WikiLeaks and the people in Iceland already had inside documents of the State Department, the IMF, and similar things that bore on the banking crisis there, the attempts of the British and the Dutch to extort payment from Iceland, and so forth. Somehow Bradley Manning got involved in that. The person that requires scrutiny here, I would say, is a certain Adrian Lamo, L-A-M-O, who, according to published accounts, seems to have been instrumental in making Bradley Manning his identity, sharing that identity with the U.S. Army and others. And the question is, why? We could say that from a public relations point of view, Bradley Manning has been convenient for WikiLeaks and for Assange, a victim that can be used for fundraising and publicity work. Remember that from the point of view of Anglo-American propaganda, you have to bring everything down to a specific first-person case. In other words, an individual. If you want to talk about the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, you need the Kuwaiti incubator baby stories told by the daughter of the Kuwait ambassador. If it's the Iraq War of 2003, you've got to have Jessica Lynch. If it's an attempt to overthrow the government of Iran, then you've got to have the case of Neda. If it's to start the Arab Spring, you've got to have Bouazizi. Most of these some of them are obvious frauds, and some of them are likely frauds. We don't need to go through all those details, but they needed a case. They needed a victim. And therefore, if you know anything about how this happened, I think this would be highly interesting. And it might also illuminate, why the father of Snowden is complaining that Assange is sabotaging his contacts with his son, and also the role of Assange's girlfriend, who has gotten herself, she's been sort of the case officer accompanying Snowden in this stay, allegedly in the transit lounges. All right. We are going to be paying attention now in coming weeks to the question of the Russian fleets. I did about a 1-hour exposition of this on another radio program, which you can find on Tarpley.net. That was done Wednesday night, day before yesterday evening. It was on September 24th, 1863, that the Russian Baltic fleet arrived in the port of New York, September 24th, 1863. And it was on October 12th, 1863, that the Russian Pacific Fleet from Vladivostok arrived in San Francisco. This was the main international dimension of the American Civil War. It was in particular the only help coming to Abraham Lincoln and the forces of Union and anti-slavery, the only help coming from abroad. Notoriously, the British and the French were violently hostile to Lincoln and the Union, eagerly waiting for a chance to intervene, to make war against the United States, to burn the city of New York. We've got discussions, we got papers in the British Admiralty, how they'd like to burn Boston and how they'd, above all, like to burn New York. They think they could cripple the whole U.S. Economic and financial operation by attacking New York in 1862, 1863. So this, of course, in the 150th anniversary, we've had the commemoration of Gettysburg at the beginning of July. We're going to have the anniversary of the Chickamauga battle, right? The great George H. Thomas of Virginia, the Unionist, Rock of Chickamauga, holding off Braxton Bragg and his forces there in September at the time of the harvest moon in northern Georgia. And then we've also had Fort Wagner, right? The first baptism by fire of a black regiment, which acquitted itself with glory, and their fame is also remembered today, right? The movie Glory is the monument to that, among other things. So I did this detailed presentation. We'll do much more as time goes by, because we want you to understand this, right? When Obama refuses to meet with Putin, he is acting against the bedrock of history. This is a very, very reckless, short-sighted, futile, idiotic way of proceeding. There's every reason to always negotiate with Russia, negotiate with anybody at some level, but to negotiate with Russia. Remember, there were 3 moments of maximum danger of British-French attack on the United States. One is at late 1861, the so-called Trent Affair, in September through November 1862, after Antietam, and attempting to preempt the Emancipation Proclamation on the side of London and Paris. And then right around September, October of 1863, the crisis element was 2 ironclad battleships which were being built in a British shipyard, the Laird shipyard, for delivery to the Confederacy to attempt to cross the Atlantic then and break the Union blockade and give the Confederacy another lease on life. And in the middle of all this, these 2 fleets arrive, and they mean, watch out, Britain, watch out, France. If you attack the United States, you're going to have a world war on your hands. It's not just the United States, powerful as the United States was, but there's also this immense power with immense land armies and other capabilities, and that's the Russian Empire. Now, when you look at the descriptions of these things, you come across this phrase, eternal gratitude. You can find, and we'll cite in coming weeks, citations of American Union loyalist observers, nationalists, not slavocrats, saying, we owe an eternal debt of gratitude to Russia for this contribution. Gideon Wells, the United States Secretary of the Navy, in Lincoln's cabinet says, God bless the Russians. We're extremely gratified that the Russian fleets have come to support us and to embody this warning to the British and the French. And then, of course, in World War II, General Marshall says, George Marshall, the military head of the U.S. forces, says we owe a eternal debt of gratitude to Russia. And the idea is that in 1862, the British and the French say to the Tsar, let's intervene and get the independence of the Confederacy. And the Tsar says, I will not cooperate in that. On the contrary, if you recognize the independence of the Confederate States, you France and you Britain, I will regard that as the cause of war. And to make sure that you don't have any confusion, I'm going to send my fleet to San Francisco and New York with sealed orders that if Britain and France attack the United States, the Russian fleets will go to work for Lincoln. They will merge with the U.S. Navy and wage pitiless war against the British and the French on all the oceans of the world. And that is the biggest thing that saved the Union.